The Marinade.
There's no O in marinade. Let's try it one more time. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
The Marinade.
Marinade.
Bone marinade. The
That's
Marinade.
The Marinade. With Jason Earle.
Yes, 400 tons of steel and rock.
Welcome to The Marinade, a free-flowing conversation about the creative process with creative people. Each episode, we welcome musicians, actors, comedians, authors, visual artists, filmmakers, anyone who creates art to talk about how and why we make stuff. This is episode 149, and our guest is Terry Klein. Terry is a singer and songwriter based in Austin, Texas. His new record, Leave the Light On, will be released in November of 2023, and y'all, it is excellent. Terry's lived a really interesting life. He spent time in politics and as an attorney before turning full-time to songwriting, a decision that proved to be both liberating and fulfilling. We dive into that choice, the importance of characters, the power of music, and so much more in this conversation. I do want to give you a quick production note. I don't know what happened, but Terry's vocal is more quiet than you would normally expect from one of our recordings. He sounded great when we recorded. These things just sometimes happen, and I don't always have answers. I don't think it's going to bother most folks, but I just wanted to give you a heads up in case you're like, what did he say? I don't think it's that quiet. I think you'll be all right. Everyone, it's my pleasure to bring you my conversation with Terry Klein.
My tie was tied too tight. I was sweating in my suit. My soul shot up with an Novocaine. That used to be my train.
Is that a little bit better?
That is significantly better.
Okay, good.
How do I sound on your end?
You sound great.
Good. Thanks for doing this, man. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Me too.
I've been like Leave the Light On, your new record, is one that grabbed me immediately, and I love that feeling. I love that. Like, there are plenty of records that I give several spins and eventually it hits me, it sinks its teeth into me or whatever, its tines into me, and then there are those like this one that immediately grab me, and it's such a wonderful feeling to hear a record like that you connect with on such a deep level from the beginning, because then it just gives and gives and gives and gives and gives and gives. And every listen has given me more and more and more. You've made an absolutely brilliant record, man.
Thank you.
It's absolutely fantastic. You're welcome, and I'm excited to dive into it. But what was interesting to me, kind of as a jumping off point, because I do want to get deep into the record and the process and everything. But as I was looking, kind of doing research and getting to know a little bit more of your background, stuff started to make sense. Like, you got a political side.
I'm going to learn something.
Well, it's maybe only in the sense of the connection between me and your music, because I feel like our lives in many ways have followed a similar path. I majored in political science. You majored in political science. I didn't really work long in politics, but I interned on Capitol Hill. I went to law school. I graduated from law school. You practiced law. And then turn to the creative life. And so I'm really interested in that choice and that decision, because I think for so many of us, we talk about this a lot on the show. So many of us do this kind of normal route, whatever that means, right? And then we realize we have this inside of us, this creativity, this something we need to make, that we need to get out. And it's scary to try to take that leap. Can we go back a little bit and just sort of talk about like when you had a sense that you were a creative person and when you had a sense that you were someone who needed to write songs?
Oh, well, I think that I I come from kind of a creative family.
Mm,
My dad is retired now, but he was a journalist and a novelist, um, uh, and so kind of the act of kind of artistic creation. I've just been around it for as long as I can remember. Um, his mom was a wonderful musician, and his grandfather was a songwriter who
mm,
wrote a couple of standards and that kind of thing. Um, and so it's just kind of, I think it's just very much in me. Um, and, I found my way to the guitar when I was a teenager, like a lot of people do. I was in bands that were good, and that played at cool venues and such. And I wrote a lot of riffs, but never wrote lyrics.
mm,
Never wrote full songs with a verse and a chorus and a bridge and that sort of thing. That just wasn't part of what I did. But I feel like that riff writing um, uh, has contributed just a whole lot to um, to how I put songs together. The importance of there being some kind of rhythmic motif or a melodic motif like that, I think has been a really big part of it for me as to why this worked. I
mm,
really put the guitar away when I was about 20, and I moved it around with me, like from apartment to apartment and house to house. But and I picked up an acoustic guitar somewhere in there, and then just about exactly 10 years ago,
mm.
um, in November of 2013, I wrote a song for our younger daughter, and then wrote another song, and then wrote another song, and it was just very apparent to me that, and I hesitate to put it this way because it seems like such like Dunning-Kruger kind of ridiculousness. It felt right away like this is what I should be doing.
Mm,
um if there's some way that I can do this, if there's some way that I can pull this off, this is what I should be doing. And I music has been an insanely important part of my life
mm,
forever. um I remember in like the early 2000s, like downloading stuff on iTunes and such, and thinking to myself, okay, I just paid $10 for this record. And it was probably something bad. It was probably like a Coldplay record or a Radiohead. Radiohead is good, but like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
something like that.
X and
And
Y. It was
yes,
Coldplay's X and Y.
right. And I remember thinking to myself, I love to read too. I spend $10 on a book, I read it, and I put it in a bookcase.
Mhm,
This when I bought records, I was like, this is going to be like my friend for the next like 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 years. Um, and nothing made me feel like music. Nothing to this day makes me feel the way that music does. It makes me
mm,
feel incredibly alive.
mm.
Um, and it just sort of an electric. It's just a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Oh my God, that's so beautiful. So 10 years ago, and I think that number itself is significant to me, at least. I've been trying to totally get my head around the explosion of really great songwriting that has at least come into my consciousness, but I feel like has come into a lot of folks' consciousness since 2013. I trace it back to Jason Isbell's Southeastern.
Mm,
I really think that record had an outsized influence on a whole genre, basically carved out sort of its own subgenre, I think. And there's no success of the Zach Bryans of the world or even the Tyler Childers of the world without that record, I don't think. And I wonder if there was something happening then other than that realization that you had, something, I don't know, maybe I'm getting a little too cosmic here when I say this, but like, was there a movement, do you think, at the time, or like, I don't know, something in the air? Or was it, were you consuming those kinds of things, or like something that was like fresh and new to you at the time?
So in the fall of 2011, I was picking up our older daughter from school in Boston, Massachusetts, which is where we lived then.
Mm-hmm.
I was picking her up. We and I was about to get out of the car, and a song by Hayes Carll came on called K-Mag Yo-Yo.
Oh yeah.
And I'd never heard the song. And I'd never really, in my mind, I'd never heard anything like it. Like growing up, my dad and my brother used to listen to a ton of that Waylon Jennings live album and that kind of thing. But like, this was like just a different kind of deal. I loved his voice. I loved the instrumentation. I loved the energy. And it was like one of those sort of like pull over to the side of the road kind of moments that
Yeah.
like our parents tell us about, like listening to Bob Dylan or the Beatles or that kind of thing. For me, it was Hayes Carll.
Yeah.
And so as soon as I heard that, I went home, I looked up his other stuff, I bought his other stuff, and I set up, back in the day, a Pandora radio station. That was a Hayes Carll Pandora station. And that led me to Towns, and that led me to Guy Clark, and that led me to Prine, and to the Turnpike Troubadours, and just this entire universe of music about which people had been passionate for a while,
Mm-hmm.
but that I had not really been exposed to. And it was like the dreams about when you find a room in your house that you didn't know existed. um, so, uh, so I started like reading blogs and trying to figure out, all right, who's the next, like, who, if I like Hayes Carll, who else am I going to like? And so like I found Jamie Johnson, um, uh, and Sturgill Simpson a little bit later, but I remember reading about the Isbell record shortly after it came out. And I bought that record, I think, the summer before I even started writing songs.
Oh
So
wow.
like the notion of, the person who Hayes Carll really turned me on to for some odd reason, and I don't know what the direct line is, but was Hank Williams, Senior.
Mm-hmm.
And what I loved about that, and what I loved about Southeastern, was that it was so vulnerable, in a way that, like, you just don't, you think of country music, and me growing up, it was just sort of like, you know beer and trucks and that sort of stuff. That was what I was perceiving as country music, was like a super tiny sliver of this immense, wonderful genre.
Man, what a great story. Hayes has been a guest on my show. He was a dream guest for ever, and I got to sit down with him last year in person, which was such a treat. He played in Central Florida last year, and I got to go down to Lake Wales, Florida, and sit down with him. He's a fucking delight of a human being too. Like on
Mm,
top of all of that stuff, like it was just such a great moment for me. So for folks listening, if you haven't heard that, definitely go back and listen to that. But I completely get how Hayes was that entry point.
mm,
Um, and I think that's really interesting. I don't know that I heard Hayes's influence in your songs, but now I do, because I think one of the things that is, I want to talk about characters here in a second. Before we get to that, though, I don't want to skip over that moment, a little bit deeper dive into that moment, because it is the moment where you decided to get into to really go for songwriting, because that's a huge leap, right? Like that can be a very scary thing. And I'm at this kind of crossroads in my life where I'm a teacher. I'm a middle school teacher. I love my job. I'm very happy. I had a great week. My kids are amazing. They're writing poetry and shit. It's fucking amazing. Beautiful poetry, like unbelievable stuff. And So I don't know that I'll ever totally quit that, but I am at the place where I really want to lean into my creative work. I want to write more. I want to get paid for my writing. I want to podcast more, even though I'm producing 2 episodes a week. But I want to do more because I'm having so much fun with it. It's so fulfilling. Like what I'm hearing you talk about when you talk about music, that's how I feel right now about my writing, about my podcasting, and I want to lean into it. And so I wonder if you learned any lessons when you made that decision, like looking back on it. Is there anything like maybe advice you would give to former you, or any reflections you have on making the decision to go full in on this?
You know, the answer to that question depends on the day. The sort of what advice I would give to my former self. What I'll say about the moment itself, I think, and moment sort of broadly. Let's say it's like January of 2014 or working into February, and I'm writing about a song a week, and they're bad. They're not good songs. None of them will ever be played for anybody. But like my face changed, like the tension around like my eyes and in my temples and all that kind of stuff. It just like all of a sudden, like I was smiling more. It was really cool. My wife noticed, and she at that point was just like, whatever we can do to make this thing something you do more of. And at that point it was just like, I'm just writing songs, just like, if I have to take the girls and like go out on a Saturday afternoon so you can sit and write, I'm gonna do it because it makes you so happy.
Wow.
And this was in marked contrast to my job as a lawyer, where by this point my wife just wouldn't even ask me how my day was, because it would just cause me to kind of spiral. So we cannot discount the importance of that support, like, at all. Like she, and it's worked out really well for both of us, this kind of big move where, now she kind of focuses on her day career, and so I can cover stuff during the day because musicians work at night. And so her career has totally taken off since I started to do this full time 7 years ago.
Wow.
And we didn't anticipate that. Like, that was just totally fortuitous.
Wow. That's incredible. I'm so glad that it worked out that way. I mean, but there has to be something first of all, what I'm hearing there is just the power of having a supportive partner in that, right? Like, that's clearly invaluable and a huge part of the success of it. But also there has to be something to, and I don't know whether it's just the quality of the work you're doing, the dedication you have to the craft, or what that made it work in that way, because a lot of folks could go into that. And I've seen it. I've seen friends who go for it full time, and it just, next thing you know, they're back to doing whatever their regular job was, and so that's really interesting. As we talk about this, if you think of anything that maybe, I don't know, has also helped you sustain that other than the things that we've discussed, I'd love to, interject, and I'd love to hear about it. But I do want to dive into the record because, man, it's great. It's just like, again, it's just been the constant companion, and it's the kind of, you mentioned Hayes, I was listening to it, and there's so much sort of like reminiscent of James McMurtry and Ray Wadley Hubbard and all these great songwriters that I love so much. And these characters, man, just, I listened to Blue Hill Bay over and over again. The character in that song, and this lyric just lays me out. Me and Sarah kind of, sort of, but it's on and off. She works at Thurston's. Her ex is a cop. He pulled me over one night last March, tried to make me sweat while he chuckled in the dark. When I first heard it, I thought you said shoveled in the dark. I thought he was threatening to bury you, or to bury the character. And then I saw the lyrics on the page, and I was like, well, either one works, I guess. But it's a killer fucking line, man. And it's just like, the whole song is great. You empathize with this character. who has this very ordinary life that sounds incredibly romantic and exciting the way you tell the story.
Hmm.
Can you talk about that character in particular and sort of how that came about?
Absolutely. We, for a lot of years, would go up to Maine, to Mount Desert Island, to the quiet side of the island, to a little town called West Tremont, and we would rent a house, and it had a view of Blue Hill Bay, which is kind of like the west side of the island. So, and we loved it. And I, from the first time that you know, we started going before I started writing songs. And then when we went back after I had started writing songs, I was like, I need to write a song about Maine.
Hmm.
And so I would like try to do this stuff and hang out and write these kind of imagery dense things, not character focused things about Maine. Um, and, uh, and then one morning I was sitting here in my glamorous writing room, looking out, on a winter day, and I thought I saw a cardinal sitting in a tree right on the fence line. And in the winter, like those redbirds are like it's super intense because there's no color, like it's kind of browns and grays even in Austin in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first line, the proud little redbird sitting in a tree, that just hit me, and I was like, okay, what is going to happen now? What is this song going to be? And I was like, you know what, we had I think we'd gone to Maine the previous summer. I was like, I'm gonna put this person in Maine, and I'm gonna make this kind of the guy that you see up there all the time, who drives around in a truck, and he doesn't give a crap, and it's just like he's just who he is, and he's never gonna change. And so once I had that character in my mind, and this is always the way it works for me, it just the lines kind of started to come. And so it's funny, you're the second person who's focused on the chuckle in the dark line. One of my friends who is a songwriter who I love so much and who I think will have a record coming at some point soon, a woman named Heather Little, who's a brilliant songwriter. I tour with her and Stephen Prigmore, who I know, who you've had on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But Heather,
Stefan's the best.
He is fantastic. I'm actually going to go see him after we hang up.
Oh, tell him I said hello, please.
I will. But Heather focused on that line when I sent her the record. She was like, because I don't play that song live a whole lot when we're playing, because I'm sort of playing the hits.
Yeah.
And she was like, Terry Klein, I don't know why you didn't share this song with me, because I that line. But I think that I don't know how I feel about that character. Interestingly, like I don't know if I like him or if I don't like him. Maybe it depends on the day. And like that's when I know that I've got it. Like that's when I know that it's good. But when I know that a listener is going to hear something that means something to them, and it doesn't really matter what I don't kind of force people to believe something about something. I just kind of let them experience the facts of what happens and come to their own conclusions.
I think as I perceive that character, you paint him as a very sympathetic character. Like I like him. I just straight up like him. I'll say it like that. I mean, I think he feels stuck in so many ways, but he also has this kind of like, I don't know if optimistic is the right attitude about his situation, but he's sort of acceptance. He has a certain acceptance to his life and his situation, and I envy that. He doesn't seem very restless to me,
Hmm.
and I really like that about him. He seems like he's just like he's at peace with who he is and where he is. He knows himself. He's at peace with who he is and where he is, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's why I really connected with him. And then of course those killer lines like that. I mean, and the song's full of that, and so is, I mean, the whole record is full of stunning lines and stunning scenes. Another character I really like is old Skunk Face McGee on This
Hmm.
Too Shall Pass. That's another one of my favorite songs on the record. It made me think of, there's a Paul Thorne song, and I can't, it's been driving me crazy. I can't seem to think of it. The character's name is like Cold Stone Red Fox or Stone Cold
Uh-huh.
Fox or something. I don't know. Quick Brown Fox. I don't know. But it's a similar kind of feel. And this old Skunk Face McGee is just like into so much. And the song itself is such a rollicking song. It's just so much fun to listen to. How about, like, before we get into maybe talking about more specific characters, kind of backing up in your process, you mentioned that when you have the character, once you get that character, you said that the lines then start to flow.
Yeah.
And is your process in kind of arriving at that character similar to what you just described with the Blue Hill Bay character, where you sort of have this sort of, I don't know, abstract idea in your head of what you want to say, but then something happens and it makes you think of a character? Is that a common process for you? Is that how it sort of always happens, or are there different ways that you get to those characters?
Um, I'm like insufferable about a lot of this stuff and about like the kind of what are you trying to say question. I am like when I start to talk about it, my friends just roll their eyes. Because it is not I don't view it as my job as a songwriter to say anything.
Mm,
I view myself as a conduit, that there are ideas out floating in the universe, in the ether, and they, for on lucky days, find their way to me, and I just kind of channel them out. It's like I feel like Lori McKenna like referred to herself as a song chaser or something like that. You know, so um, so the process for me, it's really rare that um, that the keepers come from me being like, I want to write a song about this. It
mm,
tends to be that I've been thinking about something or experiencing something or thinking about a problem in the world or something like that. And then I sit down and when I'm in writing mode, which is most of the time, um, I sit down and just sit and see what comes out. And very often it tends to be something that I've been thinking a whole lot about. Um, and with Skunk Face McGee, like that was one where the first line popped into my head and I had no idea where it came from.
mm,
I'd been reading a bunch of Jim Harrison novellas. He has a series of novellas about a character named Brown Dog. And and it's people like that kind of populate those stories. So I've been so I kind of saw this person in my mind's eye, but at the same time, I'd been thinking a tremendous amount about the Zen parable of the farmer, um, which is this kind of it's a famous parable where a farmer's son like breaks his leg and people are like, oh, what a shame, and then the army comes the next day to conscript him, but they can't because he has a broken leg, and they're and everybody's always kind of saying this is so great, and he or this is horrible, and he says, well, maybe. um and so like I just had that running through my head, I found, and the skunk face character popped into my head, and I was like, all right, let's see if what let's see if we can do some kind of alchemy on this, and put these two together.
Okay, so I hear you say, right, you said that you consider yourself more of a conduit, that you're not really necessarily trying to say something in the song. I think this is interesting, and maybe this is just a comment more than a question, because politics and law are all about saying something, are all
Mm.
about like you're trying to make a point, you're trying to get something across, you're trying to communicate a very specific position on things. And I wonder if you are conscious of, were you like running as far away from that as you could? Or was that like or maybe even subconsciously, that your writing process became sort of like the opposite of that way of communicating?
Well, what chased me out of the law was the realization that we're all any of us have,
Mm,
and that we have so little time, that why not focus on being good to each other to the greatest extent
mm,
possible, like, um, uh, and showing compassion and that kind of thing. And those are just not notions that the law, and especially the kind of litigation that I was engaged in, that's just not, that doesn't come into it. You are an
mhm.
advocate, you are a zealous advocate, you are trying to get people to believe things, and come to certain conclusions, and yeah, and so when I found songwriting, I was like, wow, this is like, um, think about like the possibilities for connection here, where like, you know, where I have this song, and somebody, it's going to resonate with somebody for some reason. Um, Maybe they have somebody in their family who is depressed. Maybe they're depressed. Maybe they have they're having money trouble. Maybe they've had a broken heart. I hope they have, because that's kind of a critical part of being alive. But like, you know, um, that it just like, it struck me as, all right, I had this revelation at my desk 5 years ago that this is a ridiculous waste of time. And
Mm,
now I can focus it in this area,
mm.
so that's like, those are the stories that I seek to the greatest extent possible, is those stories where I think that people are going to connect in some way with some aspect of the lyric. And yeah.
Oh my God, that's beautiful. And I can 100% relate to so much of that. I just recently went through a kind of extended bout of unemployment, in large part because I refused to just take a job for a paycheck. I was able to make it all work, and pay my bills in the interim. And I found that, like, especially having been in education for so long, it is so important to me to be able to do things where I can connect, where I can sort of make a difference. And you can do that in all kinds of different disciplines, but given the sort of gifts and privilege that I have, I want to be able to go to work every day, since I have the choice of what I want to do. I want to be able to go to work every day and feel like I am making a connection, that the work that I'm doing is impacting somebody in a way, in a much deeper level, and that it is going to enrich their life in some way. And I interviewed for a financial planning job, and no offense, financial planners out there listening, at all, but just, it wasn't for me. Like, they liked me, they wanted me to do it, and I have a lot of skills that would translate to that world. And but ultimately I was looking at it and I thought I could probably make a lot more money doing that
Yeah.
than what I'm doing now. But as I looked at it, I was just like, are you gonna, I could see myself getting home and drinking more than I want to. I could see myself in that pit of depression on a Sunday. I could see, I could see that picture in my mind. And even though I wouldn't have to worry about my bills being paid, it wasn't worth it. and ultimate for me at least, right? And so ultimately I got back into teaching and found a great job, and it's wonderful. But I 100% connect with what you just said, that like for me, the work that I do, whether it's creative work, whether it's the educational work, that all of that stuff for me has to have something that connects to sort of a core value of mine. And if it doesn't connect to a core value of mine, then I know that I'm not going to be happy, you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, I I don't think that I kind of I hacked my way through the reasoning to that extent. Um, it was more of just sort of a series of realizations after the fact.
Well, I'm glad you came to those realizations because you've written this incredible record. It's beautiful. I love just one more like superlative about it. I love how I'm all, and I think most people listening to this agree with me. We're album people. I like a cohesive work. I mean, don't get me wrong. Release your single. It's great. I know how much work goes into something like that, and I get it. And I get the world we live in, right, with streaming, but I want your record and I want it to be meaningful. I want it to be top to bottom cohesive. And buddy, this thing is just so cohesive. It feels like a complete work, and there's not a missed moment on it. There's not a missed line. I mean, everything, it sounds so good too. Production's fantastic. Everybody playing on it's on point. It's just great top to bottom.
I appreciate you saying that a lot. And, you know, my philosophy of making records is you take the 10 best songs that you haven't recorded yet, and you bring them into the studio. You don't, sit and agonize with the producer for over 30 songs and let the producer pick. No, the artist picks the songs that they think are their 10 best unrecorded songs and goes in, and they go in and knock it out. And that's been my philosophy since the first record. What's super cool about the cohesiveness comment is that we made this record in 7 hours.
What?
We tracked it over the course. We tracked it really entirely over the course of 6 hours, and then a steel player came in the next day and added some steel to 4 tracks. But it's almost entirely live. It is between 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock on June 23rd. It is me. It is my voice with no special adornments and minimal overdubs on I think half the songs or most of the songs, no overdubs. It's just a vocal take.
Wow.
And that to me adds like this element of continuity that that will always be so meaningful to me. There's such continuity to the album, I think, because of that, almost more than the songs.
Oh, I'm so glad you shared that. That's incredible. We usually end on what you're getting down on. So that's the art that has you inspired right now. You mentioned that period where you were reading the Jim Harrison novellas. Like, what are you reading or listening to, or what's got you fired up right now?
So listening to a lot of Anna Tivel.
Okay.
Last name is Tivel. She's a songwriter from Portland, Oregon, who may well be like the best person doing this at all.
Wow.
Anywhere right now. I saw her last week here in Austin, and it was just a show where like everybody walked out kind of wide-eyed at the fact that we just experienced that. So I'm listening to a lot of Anna Tivel. I'm listening to a lot of kind of bluegrass and acoustic music, because I created this playlist for when I'm on the road to prevent me from having panic attacks while I'm driving.
Oh, God, I can relate to that.
And I found bluegrass to be really super useful for that. So, there's Norman Blake and there's Tony Rice and Billy Strings, and,
Cool.
Sturgill made the bluegrass albums, Tyler Childers has a mostly acoustic record, Live at the Red Barn, like that stuff ended up on it. So I'm listening to a lot of that. I'm reading right now a book by Larry McMurtry called Walter Benjamin at the Dairy Queen, which is kind of a memoir about his reading life. And I've loved Larry McMurtry. Like when I first started writing songs, I really got into his early novels and Cormac McCarthy's novels about Texas, and those shaped probably more of my lyrical content and my meter and pacing than anything else.
Oh, wow, awesome, man. You give me some homework. I need to get into Anna Tivel. I didn't even know that name, so I'm really excited to get into that. And I am long overdue. I had James McMurtry on the show. I'm long overdue having diving into Larry's work. I am embarrassed to say I got a copy of Lonesome Dove from the library and then never got to it, had to return it. But man, this has been such a pleasure. Your record is incredible. I'm excited for folks to hear it, and I'm just really grateful for your time and energy. This was such a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. I enjoyed it a whole lot.
Good. I'm glad. Have a great night.
You too.
Thanks. Terry Klein, y'all. Thank you so much, Terry. Thank all of you for listening. TerryKleinMusic.com for all things Terry Klein. The song you're hearing in this episode is the incredible That Used to Be My Train from Leave the Light On. MarinadePodcast.com for all things The Marinade. I just published a review of Terry's excellent new record over there. I've been writing a lot lately, y'all, and I'm going to be publishing more things on the website in the coming weeks, really ramping up sort of this whole Marinade media thing. We've got a lot of cool stuff headed your way. So follow us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Spoutable, Twitter, Blue Sky, Mastodon. We're on all the things except for Facebook, y'all. Subscribe and give us a 5-star rating on your podcast app. Tell a friend about the show. These are all free ways to support the Marinade. Please go do that right now while you're listening. It makes a big difference for us and costs so little of your time and effort. If you really like what we're doing and you can swing it, please consider joining our Patreon community. Just a couple bucks a month, y'all. $2 a month, you can gain access to Patreon exclusive content like our show, Jason's Journey, where I talk about the moments that shape my creative life and provide a window into the process of making the Marinade. I also have our show, What We're Getting Down On, with my dear friend Peter Haroldson, which is an absolute blast where we talk about the art that has us fired up at the moment. Y'all, you can now try a free trial of Patreon. You can see if you like it. No pressure. Try it for 7 days. Set a reminder on your phone in case you want to cancel, and keep on going if you dig it. We've got a great little community over there. I also post playlists that are exclusive to Patreon. A lot of times it's stuff that's unreleased stuff that I want to share, that the singles are out now, but I've gotten a chance to listen to the whole record, and I want to give you all a heads up about it. So follow us over there if you can swing it. If not, I totally get that. And if you just want to maybe, support us one time, but you don't want to commit to a monthly subscription on Patreon, I totally get that too. You can Venmo or PayPal us. We're at The Marinade on those channels, and all the money goes right back into the making of the show. We are going to Orange Blossom Review again this year, Jen Ross and I are, and I want to do more of that stuff. We've been really fortunate in the last few years to get to go cover some amazing festivals and some amazing shows, and a lot of that is due to our Patreon patrons. So thank you again. But y'all, above all, whether you contribute or not in that way, we're just so thankful that all of you listen and spread the word about the Marinade. You keep me going. You keep me fired up about this work. Until next time, go out and create something. Cheers, y'all.